Play some music. Hmm? What's up? What's up? What's up? Just gonna allow everybody to get in. What's up, people? Hope everybody's having a beautiful Wednesday. Shout out to all the people getting their hump on this Wednesday during quarantine. If you saw Beyonce is King, I'm sorry, not Beyonce is King. If you watch Beyonce's Black is King, comment that into the comment section because we're going to talk about that a little bit today, as well as some other historical topics. Symbolism. That's what we're going to talk about today. uh, you see a lot of misunderstandings, man, when it comes to symbols, whether they're spiritual or demonic, heavenly or dark. You know what I mean? And how much that is programming and has us in fear of things that's supposed to elevate our consciousness. I'm at the beautiful Agora Temple, Melrose Avenue, uh, one of the world's first cannabis temples in in the heart of LA. It's a place where you can come and find your peace, where you can come and donate and help give to charitable causes, like helping with the homeless, helping feed the homeless. So bring your donations down, bring your energy down, bring yourself down, come find your peace. Also, I got a podcast coming out, Coffee and Cannabis, with me, Goodbody. Um, Coffee and Cannabis is basically the bigger extension of what we're doing right now. Unfortunately, we can't do a lot with this pandemic, so we're not able to do a lot of filming. So, but I still want to talk, and I still want to get this info out of my head. So, let's talk. Did anybody see Black is King? I started it, but I haven't finished it yet. I started it a little bit too late, so I fell asleep. Um, but the 75% of it that I did see was great. A lot of beautiful art, symbolism, uh, music. She really bridged the gap with African and African American culture. So I thought that was pretty dope. Let's see. So one thing that stood out, from the beginning is a couple of consistent themes that Beyonce used in this documentary. She used a lot of West African symbolism, a lot of symbolism from Mali, from the Dogon tribe. And, it's something that a lot of us weren't talked about. We weren't taught growing up in school. They taught us about a lot of European history. Talked about Spain, we talked about France, Italy, Great Britain, but they didn't talk about West Africa. And we're the descendants of the people who come from there. So, and we don't know a lot about it. And the reason why this is important is because a lot of symbols that come from the cultures of our ancestors, um, we've been taught in American culture to see these symbols as dark or demonic or wrong or spooky or cultish is the word. So we gotta unlearn and relearn these symbols. 1 second, I'm gonna turn this AC off. And we're back. For example, so we're gonna go ahead and look at some stuff right now. Now we have two symbols right above my head. The one is pretty recognizable. Most people would consider it to be the swastika. And what ideas pop up when you see a symbol like that? You only think about Hitler, um, Nazi camps, evil. There's just nothing good to it. You know what I mean? But if we take a deeper look into the origin of the symbol, we'll see that it comes from Africa. So this symbol in particular, what our ancestors used to do was just map out the universe and how things move, and they formed these into what they called Indinkra symbols. And this symbol is a sacred symbol of knowledge. It's a sacred symbol of infinity, duality. It's used through other cultures as well. You see it in India. You can see it on the Buddha's chest in some parts of India. You can find it in Europe. You can find it in Asia. Um, so it's a very powerful, used to be positive symbol that later on was adopted by Germany, and then it was formed into, this hateful terror symbol we have now. Um, but the question is, how many other symbols have had the same transition happen? You know, so a lot of what happened in this documentary was Beyonce's journey and discovery of things she learned in her process of The Lion King, which is one of my favorite movies. So uh, basically, she did the same thing I did, where she saw the mythology in it, and she was able to manifest and see herself in the mythology and was able to reflect that reality back to us. And a beautiful work of art of symbolism about this inner journey within, finding yourself, remembering who you are and where you come from. And it was pretty dope. So it was pretty dope too that she was able to tell this story about our history in West Africa by using Lion King, because the story of Lion King, actually, the origin of it comes from a West African story. So for those of you who didn't know that, it wasn't just some cartoon that was written in the 90s. This is West African folklore. about the inner journey within and rising up and becoming your higher self, which is the same thing that you would see if you go further back in time into ancient Egypt. And so, what has happened to us is there's a disconnect between the people of these ancient times in Nubia and Egypt and the people of West Africa and other places. Uh, and there's a correlation. What's up, brother? Same people. If you look at this symbol right here, this heart and Dinkra symbol above me right here, you'll find this symbol in West Africa. It's another one of the power symbols of love. But you can also find this in older temples in Egypt. So there was a transition in time and history where the ancient Egyptians, or they weren't called Egyptians then, they were called different names. But that's not important right now. The important part is there was a migration that happened. But before that migration happened, there was a culture that was built. And it was based off of studying the stars, studying the planets, and illustrating the stories that they were displaying, and having the understanding that the story of the cosmos is the story of yourself. Um, and so later in time, after Egypt fell, a lot of the people transferred and migrated over to West Africa, but took that knowledge and took the information to places like Timbuktu, which is one of the big temples or universities that was destroyed through war. So, yeah, let's go back to this Lion King. I don't know how somebody just came back in and turned on this AC. Let me turn it back off one time. Okay, and we're back. So beautiful. There was a moment in this depiction with Beyonce. She was sitting on, I want to say a bull, and she had the horns on. Now, some of us who know our history saw that and understood, you know, where she was coming from with that, channeling in and representing that mother energy. So there's a deity in ancient Egypt, uh, the goddess, the cow goddess, Mut, if I'm not mistaken. We can look that up together though. And so there's a cow goddess in ancient Africa, and nobody worshipped any animals. So really quick, let's make this disclaimer. uh, there's no such thing as polytheism and monotheism when it comes to religion and cultures. That was an idea that was created to disconnect us from a more accurate reality of our own history. So all of these deities or gods and goddesses that you see on the walls in India or Egypt or South Africa or in Nubia, these are not God. These are not entities that people bow down to and were praising and sacrificing children to. No, these are depictions of characteristics of possibilities that dwell within us. So if you see an image of an animal head and a human body, it's not that they were worshiping some animal head. They were saying that this human can manifest the characteristics of whatever animal that is, not just on the surface level, but the scientific mechanisms of that thing on a more deeper level has a direct correlation with some systems that go on inside of you. So it's just breaking down different aspects of human nature. So the cow, which has others to feed, was looked at as a nurturing animal. So, and with the horns, horns symbolize a lot, and we're going to get into that on another knowledge study, because there's so many animals in ancient times that have horns, but they all different. They all each have their own meaning. So There was so Beyonce was showing a beautiful depiction of that goddess energy that is now waking up within humanity because it has been oppressed for so long. So for the past 2,000 years, we've been, you know, at war, but on a more intimate internal level, there's been a war within. So everything on the outside is a reflection within. And what's within is your feminine and your masculine self. So if there's a war within, then that means there's a war between that masculine and the feminine. And on the outer realm, it's probably going to look like there's a war between man and woman. So the universe shows us signs of who we are and what we're doing through different symbols in nature. And that's all our ancestors were doing. That's all Beyonce was doing, which I think was great. And that's all we're going to continue to do. Uh, Derek said, I just studied about the cow goddess, but it's still complex in correlation with Ra. Yeah. So remember there was a story about the cow jumping over the moon. So the moon comes out at night, right? So if we look at the sun representing the day and the moon representing the night, the sun will be representing the light or the masculine energy, and the moon will represent the feminine or the negative energy. And so that was the correlation, Derek, with Ra, with just that relationship between dark and between light, because both are necessary to produce life. But that's something we can continue to go on to because there's so much more. There's nothing in history because our ancestors were intelligent on a level we can't comprehend yet. And so if you see a sign or you see a symbol, know that all symbols have at least 4 or more meanings. So yeah, there's not just one symbol. There was something powerful that she said in this piece, and paraphrasing, but I think she said your future starts in your history. Well, she might have said it the other way around. Somebody quote me, correct me if I'm wrong. She was basically saying that you're going to find yourself, just like in Lion King. Simba was able to realize his future by remembering his past. That's what Mufasa was telling him. You've forgotten who you are because you've forgotten me, because you've been disconnected from yourself. So the story that symbolizes that in Egypt would be, and Beyonce took, if you watch it, there's this blue man who follows the story throughout, and he's there the whole way. If you look in India, there's this blue goddess. Her name is Kali, and Kali is this chaos being, or she represents the mother goddess, this cosmic being that out of her comes everything. So she's the great mother. But in this story, you have this young man. But in Egypt, so Osiris or Osar, which is the green man, or sometimes it's depicted as blue. And if you look in different stories like Black Panther or Lion King, they always talk about going to this ancestor realm or the underworld. But that's symbolically talking about the deeper parts of your mind or the inner parts of yourself. And so when you're able to go within the deeper parts of your mind or yourself to see and remove the things that should not be there, i.e. the scars in your life, right? Scar is a representation of the ego who wants to rule out of a place of pain, who wants to take control of life out of hurt or out of get back. And if you live your life being driven by that influence, then you're not yielding positive results because it's leading from an unpositive place. And we're using positive in reference of good and bad, but those are both relative. So when you're able to face those inner demons or those inner fears or those scars, and you defeat the scar within yourself, then you're able to rise up and be the king. But in order to do that, you have to remember yourself. So having that trip down memory lane can be very beneficial, because that gives you grounding to know where to start. So Osiris in Egypt represented the underworld or the god of the dead, but they weren't worshiping a dead man or a mummy or idolizing death. Death was a um, was just a symbol of transformation into another realm. So our ancestors didn't believe when you die, that's just it. I mean, you transition on to somewhere else, and you're always still here with us. So energy is energy. It can't be created nor destroyed. It's just transferred. So they're talking about the transformation of the soul from death into life. Like if you have a seed, right? If you plant that seed into the ground, symbolically, you've just buried that seed. Now, since you buried that seed, it is now the seed is symbolic of the Osiris or the dead man. But what happens when you bury it and you pour water into the ground? The water represents the mother energy, right? And in the story, you see Isis, who represents that mother energy. She comes over as a dove, pours herself into Osiris, and he rises up and impregnates her, and then they birth Heru. But the water going into the ground, watering the seed, that seed rises up, right? Becomes the tree. That story is symbolic of the process of nature. And that is the same process of you, the caterpillar into the butterfly. There's a process of death into life. Um, so it's dope. It's dope. And so I thought it was really dope to see that. I guess I don't even know what to call it, man. Like, just there's a seed planting. Oh, what's up, Paul? Good to see you, man. Um, of showing and awakening consciousness just by using symbols. Because even though our conscious mind sees certain symbols like this and immediately go from our programming to thinking something bad, the deeper part of our subconscious mind still remembers the origin of that symbol, which is something from the cosmos that existed before we even wrote it down. And so the universe is a reflection of your inner self. And so these are all different parts of the reflection of us. So anything you see with symbols, whether you like it or dislike it or think it's good or bad, there's no such thing as bad or evil. It's light and it's dark. It's duality or polarity. You have the moon is just as important as the sun. The man is just as important as the woman. The light is just as important as the dark. The child is just as important as the parent, um, because the child is the future, but the future is being taught by the past through the parent. You know what I mean? So I think that's the correlation with that statement. Um, so, man, we have a lot to learn about our past, a lot to learn about our West African traditions like Voodoo, which we've been spooked into believing that it is about spookism or about black magic. And magic is just harmony with nature, but to the untrained eye is going to look like an illusion. It's going to look like magic. So that word didn't exist in our most ancient cultures. That was something that came later because the people couldn't really understand how some of our ancestors were able to manipulate nature the way they were. Kind of the way, without him knowing how he's doing it, the way Michael Jordan is able to stay in the air as long as he does. That's manipulation of nature, because everybody can't do that. I can jump pretty high. I'm 5'10", and I can put my elbow in the rim. I don't know about today, but when I was in high school, I get up there. Manipulation of nature. Because how does that happen? I got some really tiny legs. But somehow, things get up there. But but not manipulation of nature in a way of you using it for some evil, which you could, which is where later on you would get, I guess, the idea of black magic. Um, but voodoo or voodoo meant God, but God means energy because that's what we all are. We're all the essence of this divine source or force or power that's moving. And to move in a cycle or a circle, it has a high and it has a low. So in the story in Egypt, you have Heru, which then later in Greek becomes Horus. The word Horus is where you get the word hour from. So the sun rises, goes around, comes back around. So the sun wakes up or rises to life every day and it dies at night. So there's a lot of mythology around that story, which is the story of us. And so there are 12 hours in and out. 12, 12, 12 on the clock. So we have a clock, right? And we have 12. So the idea of the 12 is that in between the 12 is where you're supposed to be, which is the 13. Now, 13 in our culture today is an unlucky number, but in our African culture, it was a positive number because 1 plus 3 equals 4. 4 is a number of foundation because there's 4 elements that make up everything. And if you have duality, there's a dual part to those 4, which is 8. And then we have creation. So our Horus Set, which is the manifestation of the ego or the dark side in the story, and Set takes Ra into the underworld to meet Osiris. There's a story behind that's where you get words like reset from. So there's our culture and our history, our knowledge, our self is not um it's not gone. It's all around us, which we just haven't been able to see it. The same way when Simba looked into the water, he wasn't able to see Mufasa, but Mufasa was still there. You know what I mean? He had to look a little bit harder. So if you look around you, you'll see like, oh, everything from our history has been recycled and brought to us again, but it's been taught to us or presented back to us in a different way to where we can't accurately align ourselves with it to elevate ourselves, which is why we're still going through the struggles of today. So next time I'm here, we're going to talk about West Africa and the traditions that come out of there. How our ancestors in the Mali area were able to map out the Sirius constellation and talk about it in very deep form. This was at least about 1,800 years ago, way before there was a telescope. So we come from some pretty dope places. They weren't just in teepees or huts or in jungles, you know, or they just weren't in Egypt with gold on their neck. You know, we've been around the world as a people, and we're awesome. So we're gonna keep talking about it. See me next week. See me on Friday as me, my boy Marcus and Duncan dive into some deep talks. And whatever questions you have, comments, or if you want to talk about a particular thing, cool. I got to go finish Black is King because I watched it too late. So don't judge me. It was a long day. But yeah, we're becoming more aware of ourselves. And I think that's great. A lot of our self is going to come off as spooky because we've been taught to hate ourselves. So when we see a lot of our symbols, we're going to hate it at first. But when you feel that feeling, if you do, allow yourself to ask yourself, why do I feel this way? And then allow yourself to push past that feeling and then learn a deeper understanding of where that feeling comes from and what's the real meaning of the thing in front of you. Because you'll be surprised to find out that a lot of things that you feel negative about are not really negative. You've just been taught to believe that to hinder yourself from yourself. So we're going to start unlocking ourselves, baby. All right. Goodbody out. Peace. Love you. Have a great Wednesday and see you soon.